I think it goes without saying that if there's one thing Hollywood loves more than creating franchises, it's milking a cliche for all it's worth. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the number of biopics that we keep getting every single year. It almost feels like Hollywood has completely run out of ideas, so it just keeps producing the one thing that works, driving that formula into the ground until there's barely any creativity or honesty left in it. And I think one of the most interesting examples of this is the music biopic. Because on paper, music biopics should work perfectly. Music is universal, it connects people, everyone has an artist that they love, an album that changed them, a song attached to a memory. So when you take a larger than life musician and put their story on the big screen, it feels like something audiences should instantly connect with. What started as stories about complicated artists slowly became formula. The same rise, the same downfall, the same redemption arc over and over again. And now, unfortunately, we have reached a point where most music biopics don't even feel honest anymore. They feel manufactured, like they were designed in a boardroom instead of written by people who actually had something to say. And I think that's especially interesting because right now we're living in a time where media consumption is at an all time high. We consume more movies, more music, more videos, and content than ever before, which also means audiences have become better at recognizing patterns. We can spot formulas instantly, we know when something feels real and when it feels engineered. And that, I think, is the main problem with most modern music biopics. Hollywood found a formula that worked, and instead of evolving it, they just kept repeating it until the genre started collapsing under its own cliches. Now, this goes without saying that most movies have always relied on certain predefined cliches, and probably the most famous of them all is the underdog story. The underdog story has honestly been driven into the ground for decades now, but despite that, it still works because the story itself is timeless. In the first act, we meet somebody who's been beaten down by the system. They've been denied opportunities, ridiculed by the people around them, constantly discouraged from chasing what they believe is their true destiny. The second act is when they realize that nobody is coming to save them. If they want a different life, they have to fight for it themselves. And then the third act is the payoff. The underdog finally achieves the thing they have desperately wanted all along. The audiences feel satisfied because they have emotionally invested in somebody overcoming impossible odds. And honestly, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that formula. Even after being stretched to its absolute limits, the underdog story can still work if there's sincerity behind it. If there's honesty in the writing, if the people making it actually care about the story that they're telling. But I think the problem with a lot of modern filmmaking is that filmmakers aren't really interested in telling underdog stories anymore. They're interested in cashing on them. Because as much as audiences like to think that we've evolved past these formulas, we still respond emotionally to them. We still love stories about struggle, about ambition, success, and recognition, and Hollywood knows that. So the same story keeps getting recycled over and over again, but each time it loses a little more honesty, a little more personality, and a little more truth. And eventually you reach a point where the formula is still there, but the humanity and the honesty isn't. And that brings me to my main problem with most modern music biopics. Because I think in today's Hollywood, studios are completely obsessed with driving formulas into the ground, and nowhere is that more obvious than in the music biopics. The amount of music biopics we keep getting every single year is honestly staggering. Every artist, every band, every cultural figure eventually gets turned into either a 2 hour movie or an 8 episode streaming series because apparently that's what audiences want now, a neatly packaged, emotionally manipulative journey through somebody's life. And to be very honest, I don't even inherently dislike biopics. I think when a biopic is told with honesty and conviction, it can be an incredible experience as a viewer. The problem is that most modern music biopics are the exact same movie. They all follow the same structure, the same emotional beats, the same character arcs. There's no innovation left, no unpredictability, no authenticity, no room for the film to become anything more than a polished retelling of cliches we've already seen 100 times over. Now, my issue isn't that these moments don't exist in real life. The issue is that every single film presents them in the exact same way. And eventually, you have to ask yourself, are these films actually trying to understand these artists, or are they just recreating a formula that Hollywood knows audiences already respond to? And I think the main reason this keeps happening is because most modern music biopics aren't actually interested in understanding the artist anymore. They're more interested in preserving them as these perfect, untouchable figures in the eyes of their fans, stripped of any flaws and contradictions that might actually make them feel human. Because most of these films are made with the because most of these films are made with the involvement of surviving band members, families, estates, labels, all these different people working behind the scenes to protect a legacy. And naturally, when you have that many people trying to maintain a public image, the final product becomes heavily sanitized. The rough edges disappear, the controversies get softened, the ugly truths get pushed into the background. And what you're left with isn't really an honest portrayal of somebody's life anymore. It's a carefully managed version of their career highlights presented in glossy 4K. And at that point, you're not really watching a story about a person anymore, you're watching a brand being preserved. And I think that's the biggest reason why most modern music biopics feel so emotionally empty. Because real people are messy, real artists are contradictory, their lives are uncomfortable, chaotic, selfish, brilliant, destructive, vulnerable, sometimes all at once. But modern music biopics are terrified of that complexity. They want the struggle without the ugliness, the downfall without the consequences, the genius without the damage. So instead of truly exploring these people as human beings, the film reduces them into these polished, inspirational myths designed to protect a legacy rather than examine it. And I feel like that's exactly why audiences have slowly started disconnecting from these movies. Because somewhere along the way, music biopics stopped feeling like stories and started feeling like products. And modern audiences are a lot more smarter than Hollywood gives them credit for. We live in a time where we have unlimited access to artists in a way most people never ever did. We have interviews, documentaries, live performances, archive footage, podcasts, social media posts. We can see these people as they actually are. So, when audiences watch a heavily polished biopic that tries to compress an entire life into these neat little dramatic beats, it immediately starts feeling artificial. Especially because real life doesn't really move in three acts. Real people are inconsistent, their lives don't build perfectly towards redemption, their trauma doesn't arrive at convenient moments in the screenplay. But modern music biopics need everything to fit into a cinematic structure. But modern music biopics need everything to fit into a cinematic structure. So eventually the person disappears and only the formula remains. And I think that's also the reason why so many recent music biopics feel so emotionally hollow despite being technically well made. Because they're so focused on recreating moments that they forget to understand the person behind them. I think the irony is that the lives of musicians are naturally chaotic, emotional, contradictory, and deeply compelling. These are people who created art out of loneliness, addiction, insecurity, ambition, love, grief, sometimes all at once. Their lives should make for incredible cinema. But somewhere along the way, the genre became less interested in understanding artists and more interesting in preserving them. Formulas can still work, familiar stories can still move people, but only when there's sincerity behind them, only when there's something truthful at the center of it all. And maybe that's what these films are missing now, truth. So, yeah, that's it from my side. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you have seen music biopics, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you haven't ever seen a music biopic, go watch it and form your own opinions. If you have enjoyed the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel in the longer run. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.